All right. It seems like the participants are slowly filling in from the waiting room, which is great. Dan, if you can hear me, I've promoted you also to be one of the panelists with us.
Okay.
That's Dan from our team at Atlas.
Hello, hello.
Perfect, Dan. So we've got you. We just don't have you on camera yet. So if you want to adjust your camera settings as well.
I think we're good now.
Perfect. So as folks are coming in, we'll wait a few more minutes to kick things off. Dan, just a couple of housekeeping rules, and I'll mention this to the guests as well. We are going to encourage everyone to put their questions inside of the Q&A chat box.
Okay.
And you can also use chat, but putting it in a question and Q&A box will help us coordinate and also share all of those Q&A after with everyone who's participating, as well as people who maybe don't get a chance to join us today.
Yeah.
Perfect. So I want you to just keep an eye on that, and I'll do my best to address the questions if I can during the presentation. Otherwise, we'll leave enough time to address them afterwards.
Okay. Sounds good.
Fantastic. Hey, Ian, we have 52 attendees at this time, and more are coming in. Obviously, we had quite a bit of registration. So why don't we actually kick it over to you to kick things off, and then I'll be happy to take over.
Well, thank you very much, Ashton. I'd like to introduce our newest partner with the BC Restaurant Association. It's Atlas Hospitality. Ashvin Musavian is on and conducting this seminar today on gratuities. And I just wanted to say that, gratuities have been around for a long time, but this is becoming one of the most circumstantial, I think, issues that we're faced with right now, both from a CRA perspective and ensuring that we don't trigger something with CRA, and are managing gratuities on a hands-off mode and allowing our employees to manage that tip pool asset. But at the same time, and in British Columbia, we've run into a major problem, and I stress major problem, that we've been going around and around in circles with WorkSafe for about 18 months. And that issue here is they're wanting to pass a requirement that would compel us to add gratuities into our payroll. The consequences of that are significant. And just to top line it, A, it means our premiums go up with WorkSafe, but B, it puts us in a very perilous position with CRA. You're going to have one system that's reporting in an accounting system to deal with reporting to WorkSafe, and we're going to have another accounting system with CRA. So we are. I don't want to use the word fighting this, but we've mounted a major assault on this, and we do intend. The outcome is that we want this at least put away for a couple of years. I've been in touch with the Premier, and he understands our concerns as an industry. It's not the time to do any of this to our industry. And that's why, full circle here, I really invite Atlas into our family at BCRFA to help us manage this issue, and to the very best that we can protect our businesses. So Ashton, thank you very much, and over to you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ian. We're really excited to be partners with BCRFA and really be able to contribute in our way to the great work that Ian and his team have been doing for the association in the province of British Columbia. Again, my name is Afshin Musavian. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Atlas. We are a hospitality automation company. Today, I also have Dan Dumont from our sales team here with us as well. He's just going to help us field questions and make sure that we are able to leave enough time to address any other questions that come up. So a couple of quick housekeeping rules, folks. Please note that we have a chat box available, and we also have a Q&A available. Ideally, you could put in your questions inside of the Q&A, because that helps us ensure that we answer them in a timely manner. Also, for ones that make sense, we can answer verbally. For the other ones, we'll be able to answer in text. All the answered questions will be shared with everyone. And since this session is being recorded, we will be able to actually share all those answers with some of the folks who really wanted to join but weren't able to. We got a large number of participants today, which is really exciting. And it really speaks to the fact that Ian mentioned, which is that tip management is top of mind for all operators across the country. We're also expanded into the US, and honestly, it is the same south of the border as well. So with that, I'll kick things off, give you a quick background on Atlas, and then we really want to walk away with this presentation, ensuring that you guys have clearly understood what are the obligations and what are the responsibilities from the employer and on the employee side, and best practices to ensure that both the employer and the employee can get as much exemptions as possible on any taxes due on tips generated. And with that, we'll kick things off. Okay, so a little bit about Atlas itself. Like I said, we are a hospitality automation company. What this really means is that we're a technology company, Canadian, based out of Toronto, that is building tech specifically for the hospitality sector. Our belief is that even though there's a lot of great technologies out there, a ton of them were repurposed for our industry. And our goal is to actually build purpose-built products for hospitality owners, operators, and their team members. We currently have 2 products that help with this type of automation. The first one is called Ops. It's short form for operations. It really helps you centralize all of your data and bring the data at the fingertips of your employees and your team members so they can easily use it to make data-driven decisions. On the other side, we have our Tips product. It really does everything, handles everything having to do with tips, from the division to distribution and compliance. And the good news is we're not done there. We're adding a new product, Atlas Payroll, available soon. We actually have a couple of customers on beta right now. And then from there, we're building a suite of other products. Now, if you have an existing payroll company and you love working with them, or existing scheduling company, that doesn't matter. We might partner with many of those operators. So we're always able to integrate with what you have or offer you an alternative with Atlas. We work with operators of all sizes. Hospitality is a wide umbrella of really hardworking people, and they include hotels, international hotels like Nobu, for instance. We manage their automation for them. Franchises from Boston Pizzas to Ruth's Chris to Moxie's. We have wineries like Andrew Peller and a few others, golf courses, coffee shops, and even some hospitality retail like Craig's Cookies that have been really looking for better tools to automate their day-to-day tasks, and Atlas has been able to take care of those needs for them. On the other side, one of the other things that's super important for us is our industry partnerships. We really have been continually working to partner with the best-in-class associations who tend to be the source of knowledge, education, and insights, as well as government relations for each one of the operators in respective provinces. So, of course, we are partners with BCRFA, excited to launch this partnership with this webinar and many more educational opportunities in the future. A quick note, something that you guys all received in the communication, is that we do have some exclusive pricing for BCRFA members, which I'll get into at the end as well. Restaurants Canada, BCRFA, Ontario Restaurant Association, Manitoba Restaurant Association, Alberta Restaurant Association, as well as Nova Scotia Restaurant Association have selected Atlas as their exclusive tip division and distribution partner. And there's good reason for that, because we're the only company that can really address all the 3 challenges having to do with tips, which we'll get into momentarily. All right, so when we look at tip management, and we've done our research, not only in Canada, but in the UK, the United States, Caribbean, Mexico, anywhere in the world where there is tipping, there are 3 key challenges. The first challenge tends to be the tip division. Often operators have a spreadsheet, and in the spreadsheet, they have all of their staff names, their tip division rules, and they manually import the data from their point of sale system, whether they're doing tips based on net sales or a sales category or tip pooling. All of this data lives inside the spreadsheet. The spreadsheet naturally needs to get inputs from the POS on a regular basis, as well as the scheduling, and it needs to be really kept up to date with who's active employee and who's not. God forbid you forget to add a new hire and you've already done the tip division for that week or that day, you have to redo that work. Or if an employee asks you, hey, how did I end up getting this, $312.25, you have to really now block off all the cells inside of that spreadsheet to be able to clearly show that employee how their tips broke down. So spreadsheets, were a great solution when they came about, definitely better than pen and paper, but we can all agree that they do take a lot of time to manage on an ongoing basis, especially as businesses get larger and they process larger volumes of tips. The second challenge has to do with tip distribution. This really wasn't a challenge back in the day when everything was in cash, because when you made everything in cash, you always had the amount of tips that the customers left at your fingertips, and you'll be able to easily distribute those tips. Maybe the biggest challenge at the time was that, you've got $100 of tips in two $50 bills, and your staff would ask you for change. But aside from that, you always had the cash on hand. Now, if your operation is like many of the other operations across Canada and the US, our bet is perhaps over 85, perhaps even 90% of your transactions are on credit and debit cards. This means that you never end up having enough money available to pay out the tips in cash. So you'll have to resort to bank trips. I think for the operators who've been there, you go to the bank, ideally you've ordered the money up front, but you have to stand in line, you get a bunch of money, you walk nervously back to the location, watching out for everything around just to make sure that you're not really being, targeted or having any issues with that much cash on hand. Not only do you get the cash to the location, but now it's time to count it. So you sit down and count all those monies, put it on envelopes, and then you have to round up, round down, and keep track of all of those again. And again, we've been there when a couple of 20s have got stuck together and it creates a dispute because you were sure that you had given the money, the employee's sure that they've counted the correct amount, and then there's that discrepancy to go and follow. Of course, other ways are putting tips on payroll, which also will end up costing you a lot, and we can show you that. And finally, getting cash deliveries, which is another method, which is again also expensive. Finally, the third challenge with tip management. The main reason we're here today, because I think the first and second challenge are very clear to operators. The third challenge is a challenge that's not new. It's a challenge that's been there for a very long time. It doesn't only apply to smaller operations. It actually even applies to all of the larger operations. And we deal with large hotel groups, large restaurant groups with full finance and legal teams, and they still haven't been able to fully wrap their heads around what they need to do to meet both federal as well as provincial requirements. So by the end of this webinar, I can guarantee you that we will make this crystal clear so you know exactly what you need to do. And we do this with a story. So the story goes like this. Back in the day when everything was in cash, when someone showed up to your location, and let's say the total bill was $100, they would put $100 in addition to the tip that they wanted to leave for your team members. Now, this tip would have been, let's say, $10, $15, whatever it was, the customer would simply put that amount on the table. Your server or bartender would grab those totals, take a look at the read, and they would see that, oh, $100 belongs to the business. So they would put that in the till. Whatever money was in the till would go in the bank account. On the other side, the $15 would be clearly separated, perhaps in a mason jar or a bowl, and then the employees would decide how they wanted to divide and distribute that. In that world, there was two things that were very clear. Number one, this tip money was not revenue because it never got mixed up with your other sales amounts. And number two, it never hit your books. So there was no record of the tips being put out there. These tips were just going to the employees, and the ownership and the onus of reporting and all that remained with the employees. Moving forward to where we are today. It's a very similar process for the customer. When a customer looks at this, instead of reaching into their pocket and bringing out additional cash, now they reach for that machine. And when they grab the machine, they have the pre-prompted tip amounts and a other section ideally where they can adjust their tips, and they adjust the tips as they want, and then they swipe their debit or credit card. To them, things are very similar to what it was with cash, perhaps even more accessible because they don't carry cash with them. But on your side, what now ends up happening is that number one, there is a record of that on your point of sale system. Number two, there is another record of that on your payment processor. And number three, there's a third record of that in your bank account after all the deductions have been done and the payment processor deposits the money in your bank account. Now you have the money in your bank and you have to go ahead and move that money from your possession and pass it on to your employees. And this is where the problem lies. Because as the business owner or the business operator, you are responsible for clearly showing that this $15 was not revenue and it is not wages when it gets paid to your staff members. Now you may say, why does that matter? Let's get into that. That matters because there are two types of income that your employees have right now. They have wages. This could be hourly pay, salary pay. As you all know, you, the employer, are the one that is paying this amount. And also, you, as you have these part-time and full-time employees, are responsible for sending the taxes by first deducting it and then filing it and sending it to the CRA. This means for those of you who are using a payroll system, let's say a great payroll system like Push or others, you are now entering those totals inside that payroll system. The payroll system automatically deducts the federal tax. It deducts the provincial tax. And based on your province, it also takes away the CPP, which is Canadian Pension Plan, 5.95%, the EI, which is employment insurance, 1.64%, as well as other things like WorkSafe or EHT, depending on the size of your operation. CPP and EI are deducted from the employee's pay and matched by the employer. So as an example, if there was $100 of pay, $7.59 would be deducted from the $100. That's the employee's contribution. And the business has to go to their own pocket and put up $7.59 on top to match the CPP and EI premiums. Now, that is true for wages. But tips, when we look at tips, and I want to address the difference between two types of tips. There is auto gratuity and volunteer tipping. This is all relevant to everything outside of auto gratuity. So when a customer on their own accord chooses to leave a tip for your customers or for your employees, they're the ones that is paying this amount. This amount is going to your employees. And as a result, outside of the province of Quebec, across all other provinces except Quebec, the employee is the one who's responsible for reporting that income. Now, on any income, there is federal tax, there is provincial tax. But because this is not income from the employer, there is no CPP or EI, neither taken away from the employee nor paid by the employer. So we all understand also hospitality has been around for a long time, and the onus of responsibility for reporting tips has always been with the employees outside of Quebec. In Quebec, you have to actually put it on payroll. We also know that there's a group of employees that have been filing exact amounts and a group of employees that haven't. I want you to know that Atlas does not do any reporting at all to the CRA or anything else like that. We also aren't here to tell people what to do aside from share the facts. But facts are, if you're a server who's reported every single year, what would have happened is, as an example, on the side over here, you would have had a $50,000 of tip income. These are for round numbers. Let's say $1,000 a week. It's a good amount of tip income. And if you're filing, you would have had to pay your federal tax. You would have had to pay your provincial tax. But if you're able to prove that this was tip income, you would be exempt from the CPP and EI. On the other side, let's say you're an employee who has been in the industry for 20 years, you've never filed, and you get audited today. Even in your case, if you can prove that the total income for your tips was actually tips, then even you will get the exemption from the CPP and EI taxes. Now, the thing to clarify here is that this exemption is something that's offered. If an employee says, no, you know what, I do want to contribute to my CPP and EI, well, CPP specifically, they can contribute to their CPP at the end of the year by just letting their accountant know. And they would say, hey, here's my total tip income, and please add the CPP amount for me as well. So it's an option. With thousands of employees on our platform, nobody really does that because people would rather have the money in their pocket. But just from educational purposes, that is something that is available for the employees. You are going to give them an option, whether they should, and if they want to, contribute to their Canadian pension plan or not. Now, to break this down further, we brought on board one of the leading taxation lawyers in Canada. His name is James Rhodes. He consults with Restaurants Canada, Ontario Restaurant Association, in fact, even BCRFA. And with him, what we wanted to do was break down how we can clearly explain the difference between the two categories and how we can help both the operators, the employers, and their teams, the employees, be able to clearly understand the difference between the requirements here. So here's how we've broken it down. These are sequential decisions, so they're made one after the other. The first two decisions are in control of the employer. The employer can decide, decision number one, do we want to generate tips and allow customers to leave tips at this location or not? For sake of the example, if your business is a business that said, no, we don't want to have customers leave tips here, no employee group can force you to change your policy. So they can complain to the Ministry of Labor, hey, my employer said they don't want to have tips here. The Ministry of Labor will tell them that's their decision. But of course, anybody on hospitality understands that tips are an additional source and a much needed source of income for employees. And as a result, to stay competitive as employers, we all say yes to tips. We want customers to leave tips for employees. So we go with yes. When you go with yes, you have three choices. Do you want these tips to be what's called controlled by the CRA, or direct, or a mix? Controlled is exactly what it sounds like. You, as the business owner, control one or many aspects of the tips. As an example, when you have an auto gratuity policy, you're no longer letting the customer choose how much tips they should leave. So let's say your auto gratuity policies on private events, you have a BEO, a contract that says, hey, for this event, we charge a 20% auto gratuity. That is no longer a volunteer payment from the customer to the employee. That is a service charge. Or if you apply that to tables of 10, that is also a service charge on any service charge. As if you were selling a bottle of wine, as if you were selling a burger. It's products that you're selling. And when you sell a product or service, you must charge sales tax. So in British Columbia, that would be your GST that you must be charging on top of the auto gratuity. And because that is revenue, when it's paid to your employees, it must be paid on payroll because it is now wages. So quickly going back to this, when you add auto gratuity automatically, as far as the CRA is concerned, gets added in the category of wages. So you are responsible for putting it on payroll, which makes sure all the taxes are properly taken off before paying to the employee. On the other side, direct tips are one where this is something that most employers want to aim for. They just need to understand how. This is the one where you say, look, I want my customer to be able to leave a tip for my employees, but I don't want to have anything to do with it. I am just a conduit. The money flows through my business and that's it. And a third model is something that we're seeing more often, and this is the update to the CRA position. They say that, look, we understand you may have a property that you have some private event rooms and a regular dining experience, or even if you wanted to apply auto gratuity to large tables. As long as your system is able to clearly divide up the auto gratuity portion from the regular volunteer tipping, and as long as the auto gratuity had sales tax charged on it and is being paid out on payroll, you are able to have both models active. And this is something that we do for a number of our clients. Okay, let's dive into what the CRA does to determine whether your tip model is controlled or direct. So we're going to go into that now. So here we have a table that we put together, and this is a really simple table because it's exactly the approach that the CRA uses to determine if you fit the controlled tip model or a direct tip model. Here's a quick side note and a very important one. As far as the CRA is concerned, your tip model is controlled unless you can prove otherwise. So in other terms, you are guilty unless you can prove otherwise. And unfortunately, that's the position that they take. And it doesn't matter if you meet the requirements 99%, one single percent can actually make your system shatter, and they would apply the controlled status to your tip model. So let's review what these are. Number one question, do the tips or are the customers leaving tips voluntarily? So if you have a system that truly you don't have any auto-grab, yes, customers leave tips voluntarily. But if you say that and the CRA auditor takes a look at your open table or your resi or your talk or your menus, and it says tables of 10 get an auto gratuity of 10%, or if they call your location and they say, hey, I'm just a guest, I want to make a party for 15, is there any auto-grad? And your host says, yes, there is an auto-grad, then they're going to say, aha, all your tips are going to be considered controlled. So it's really important, if you have auto gratuity, to answer this question in this way. We have both auto gratuity and volunteer tipping. All of volunteer tipping is paid directly to the employees under direct requirements. All of our auto gratuity, we charge sales tax on it and we pay it out on payroll. That's a perfect answer to get you the first check mark. The second check mark is about who decided on the division model. Now, in all cases, the business operators and business owners have a tip division model because they have a different vantage point. They can step back and see that, hey, the experience for the customer starts from the person, who takes their reservation, to the person who walks them to the table, to the person who fills up their glass, to the clean dishes that come in from the back of house. So really from the front to the back, everybody contributes to this experience. And that's the differentiator between a 12% tip and a 22% tip. So they devise a model that ensures every department can have a fair share of tips. But the CRA's position is that it's fine for you to recommend a model, but if you put your foot down and say, no, hell or high water, this individual is going to get X percentage of tips, then by definition, you are controlling the tips. So the way to remedy this is something that our advisor has come up with, which is called a tip committee or a gratuity committee. What this really means is that even a client of ours that has over 200 employees. So from 200 employees to even a group of like 5, we select a small subset. So as an example, in both cases, it could just be 3 individuals. We choose an odd number. The reason why we choose an odd number is because there's a couple of components that you want to vote on. But there is one single and perhaps the most important rule. And that rule is that you want this committee to collectively and unanimously agree on the tip model proposed to them. So to do this in an equitable way, our recommendation usually is that you grab a server, a senior server. You grab a senior kitchen staff. It could be a line cook, it could be a sous chef, it could be the chef. And you also grab another person. If your managers participate in tipping, it could be your managers. If it's a bartender, you put these individuals together. As the business owner, you actually can play a role in selecting these first individuals. And once these individuals are there, they sign off an agreement saying that the business has informed us that they want to have direct tipping. We, the employee committee, have confirmed that we want to divide up our tips in this way and distribute it in this way. That legal document is something that you will need to prove and you will need to show the CRA if you're ever audited, so that when they ask, is the tip division model controlled by the employer, you would say no, and you have the documents. And because things happen so fast in our industry, if they audit an employee and the employees asked, hey, is your tip model direct or controlled? And they say, I don't know, and I think it's controlled. You'll be able to have the proof to say, no, here's an agreement that clearly shows you've agreed to this tip model being direct and you've signed off on. Not only do you want to have this agreement signed by those tip committee members, you also want to get the rest of the employees to sign it so that they're aware. If your employment contracts mention anything about tips. So as an example, if you have an employment contract for a manager that says, hey, manager, you get a salary of X, and we can tell you that you will be earning $10 per hour for tips or $500 of tips in a given month or whatever, you are now guaranteeing the tips for that employee. When you guarantee the tips for that employee, that will be considered wages. So you need to adjust your model. Simple way to adjust the model is we come up with what is the equivalent percentage or a tip model division rule that allows them to have a similar type of earning, but it cannot be guaranteed. Meaning that if for a month, for some odd reason, you have $0 in tips, just like all the other employees, that individual can't have additional earnings. That's another important nugget here for ensuring that you're not promising tips and you're not controlling the tip division model. Moving on to the next, which is the third requirement, which actually goes hand in hand with the fourth requirement. And here, these two requirements actually got a little bit more clear and a little bit more challenging roughly about 3 years ago. 3 years ago, there was a restaurant by the name of Restaurant Amano. This restaurant is based in Nova Scotia. And what happened was that they were audited by the CRA. Now, when they got audited, the restaurant challenged the CRA position and said that, look, we have the volunteer tipping. We don't have anybody, we don't have any auto gratuities at all. And secondly, we have a tip committee. So we can clearly show you that the division model is in control of the employees themselves. Now, the CRA's position was, okay, well, when do you pay the tips? And they said, look, we have a lunch shift and a dinner shift. And what we do is we pay the employees their tips the next day via e-transfer. CRA turned around and said, well, that's not good enough because what we expect is that you're able to show that the money was put in control of those employees at the end of the shift. Now, this sounds a bit crazy because if you have a breakfast shift, a lunch shift, and a dinner shift, CRA's position is that you need to show me that the tips that were left in breakfast were put in possession of the employees. The tips at lunch, same thing. The tips at dinner, same thing. On the CRA webpage, there's a line that says, under unique circumstances, you may be able to pay next day. But when this has been challenged in court by our lawyer, as well as other operators who've unfortunately gone through this audit, those circumstances are very rare. So if you want to say, oh, you know what, somehow we ended up being that the Friday tips were on December 31st and January 1st, the banks are closed and we had to wait till Monday, and fine, that can happen. But that cannot be the rule for the business that every day you're paying it the next day. And again, it doesn't matter when your employees divide those tips amongst themselves. It just matters that you, the business, can show that you're not in possession or control of the tips that the customer left at that shift. So it goes hand in hand because not only could you not be in possession of tips, you also can't be the one that's processing the tips to the employees unless you have the cash available on location to be able to give to them immediately at the end of the shift. If you're looking to process the tips later, they would say that, well, how are you processing the tips if you weren't in possession of it? So they go hand in hand. And their example was, we pay the tips the next day and our finance team is the one that's processing it. So as a result, these two caused that location to be considered controlled, which meant that they had to go and pay CPP and EI for the employer portion and the employee portion for up to 3 years past, which is a significant penalty. Now, you may say, I have all of this in place. You need to have the paperwork to prove it. Because if you just say simply, yes, my employees have agreed to this, but there's no paper trail or contract, they're going to say, well, there's no proof. Or, yes, we've put the money in possession of the employees. Show me the records that you've done that. And if you don't have proof, then it's going to be considered control. So why do we keep saying controlled, controlled, controlled? And why are we trying to inform you that controlled is going to cost you money? Well, because if your system is considered controlled, you are not exempt from CPP and EI on those tips. This means that when a customer leaves a $100 tip, the business is responsible for taking off the CPP and EI so that, 5.95% plus 1.64%, roughly about 7.59%. You should have deducted that from the $100, and you should go to your own bottom line and grab the equivalent amount and contribute on top. So if you haven't done this, the CRA will hold the business responsible for both portions, which ends up being 15.18%. So in order to illustrate this, we have built 3 calculators that show different costs of tips based on folks that say, look, this is all confusing. I already have a payroll company. I'm just going to simplify my life. I know it will upset some of my staff, but I'm going to go ahead and put the tips on payroll. The second example is of an employer that says, you know what, I'm going to take the risk. How big can it be? And the third example is explaining this to your staff members and your team members, trying to show them financially why direct tips save them more money. So let's start off with the first example. An employer who said, you know what, I already pay a payroll company. I'm just going to continue to pay them, and I'm going to add the tips on top of the hourly or salary wages and just pay them out in that way. So if you, and this PDF will be yours actually after the webinar. So if you could use it, you could use it here, or you can use it by going to our website, going under more, and seeing tip calculators. And here, we're going to do the calculation for why paying tips on payroll are super expensive. So let's take a look over here. So the first thing I want to show you is that, as an example, we have a business here. This business generates $1 million of sales. Their average tips are 20%. So they have $200,000 of tips. If they put this $200,000 on payroll, the business has to contribute the portion of CPP and EI. That's why the business has to put in $15,000 from their own bottom line to process this $200,000 of tips. Expensive and not recommended, because even if your revenues go up to 2 million, you're doubling that. If your revenues go up to 3 million or 4 million, it's a proportional ratio. So tips on payroll, too expensive. Look to avoid that. The second example is, okay, well, you know what, Afshin, we've heard you, but I don't think the risk is big enough for us to change what we're doing today or change from the company who's currently managing this for us and potentially could be considered controlled, and to do this in a proper way. So here, the messaging is mismanagement of your tips can cost you up to $30,000 per every $1 million of sales you generate. Let me break that down. You generate $1 million in sales. Average tips are 20%. You and your business generated $200,000 of tips, which belong to your hardworking employees. Now, if your system is audited and your process is audited, and the CRA determines that you are actually in the controlled tip category, you notice that your penalty is now, or the cost of it's now double, because you will be held responsible for the employee portion and the employer portion. Of course, you could go and contact your employees and say, hey, John, hey, Julie, can I get CPP and EI from the tips I paid to you last year? I think you know the answer to that. So this is why the CRA will hold the business responsible. And if your revenue is 2 million, that is twice the amount. If your revenue is 3 million, that is 3 times the amount. There is more, unfortunately. The CRA can actually go back up to 3 years if they want to, even more, but most often we've seen them go up to 3 years. So if your business has been operating for 3 years, let's go back to the $1 million example, the liability can actually be over $90,000. This is the type of liability that no business can afford. We heard last year from Restaurants Canada that the average profitability of a restaurant in Canada was 2.8%. This means that if you had $1 million in revenue, your average profit was $28,000. From that $28,000, now you got to pay $91,000, which means the business goes up and the employees don't have jobs to go to. So it's lose-lose for both the business and their team members. Finally, I want to show you how we explain the benefits of direct tips to team members, because anytime there's change, there better be a good reason why you're changing things up. And what better reason than more money in their pocket? So if I'm a server and I make $1,000 of tips in a given week, there are 4.3 weeks in an average month. That's $4,300 of tips. If you, the business, have to take off the CPP and EI from it, you're obligated to take off $326 a month, or in a given year, almost $4,000. Which one of your employees wants to give up 4 weeks of tips when they can clearly and legally be exempt from it by ensuring that the business qualifies for direct tips? There's literally more money in the staff's pocket legally with the correct exemption when they are on direct tips. So again, all of this will be yours after if you want to play around for your own numbers. Now, I want to do a quick pause here. I do want to share a quick poll that will take you less than 30 seconds to fill up. It just asks 4 simple questions. If you can each take a minute to fill that up, I'd really appreciate it. I'm launching the poll right now, so you should be able to see that. If you can take a quick minute to answer these questions, we'd really appreciate it. And then we'll move on to the second part of how we can ensure you can meet 4 direct tips category and be exempt from CPP and EI. So if anyone has any issues seeing the poll, please let me know. Seeing some people are starting to fill it out, which is fantastic. And if you filled it out and you want to take a quick minute to calculate what the cost could be for you, you could simply scan this QR code with your phone or visit atlasrms.com/calculators. Okay. Appreciate everyone who took the time to do this. That's great. I think we got a good number of folks here. Okay, we could move on from here now. Okay, so we have an anonymous question. I'll just answer that quickly. What assurances can we provide so that if you do everything that we're recommending, that our application can provide you a bulletproof solution against the CRA coming after you? So the way that to really look at this is that our setup and our process is very similar to a payroll company. The payroll company gives you a set of rules, set of timelines, clear instructions. As long as you follow those instructions, if your payroll is audited, you will be fine. Now, in the same way that your payroll company is not going to protect you from an audit because the payroll company can't control some of the things that you or your staff may do, that's the same position that we have. But what I can tell you is that we could put you in touch with customers who were requested to provide their tip model. And once they did provide the tip model based on what Atlas has put together with them, that audit went away. So that's the biggest proof that we can provide to you. Because there are so many nuances on day-to-day operation, we can't guarantee, because again, it's up to you to input the information, explain things to your staff, and just stay within those guidelines provided. It's the same reasoning that QuickBooks has as an example. Someone can use QuickBooks to embezzle money. That has nothing to do with QuickBooks. That has to do with that operator. If the operator followed the instructions of QuickBooks and general accounting rules, they will be fine and protected against audits. Great. If you're in a rush to just get to the cost side, the cost is at the end of this. After we've explained everything, we're nearly there. Of course, the presentation will be shared with you. So if you need to jump off, by all means, we understand. You could easily fast forward to the end of the presentation or review the follow-up email that will be shared with you afterwards. Okay, so moving on to the second part, really, we're a couple of minutes away from cost, by the way, in case you wanted to know. The way that we really set things up is, let me actually get to this first. We provide you with a solution that is compliant with the CRA standards and meets your provincial requirements. We help you automate tip division and distribution, and we remove cash from the equation. On the other side, for your staff members, they will receive 100% of their tips. They will be directly deposited to their bank account, transparent tip reports, and the tip division is controlled by them. And collectively, both the business and the employees are exempt from the CPP and EI. Now, to break down exactly how all of this works, I just want to take 2 quick minutes to show you a diagram that will explain exactly the logic that goes into place to ensure all of those requirements that I mentioned to you are properly met. And this is how all of that really works. So inside of our platform, we actually create 3 different users. When we set this up, you have the owner. So this could be the ownership, the director of finance or finance team, HR team. These individuals, when they sign in inside of our application, they sign a small agreement that simply says, we, the business, have authority to bind the business. We also have selected a direct tipping model, and we have selected a committee who can manage the tip division and distribution. Finally, we have selected Atlas as our trustee. The tip committee is invited to the platform. All of this is managed by our accounts team who helps you get set up. Once the tip committee signs up, they sign an agreement that we know we're on direct tips, we know that we're the tip committee, and we too will select Atlas as our trustee. And finally, you have the tipped employees. This is the rest of your staff. When they sign in, they simply agree that yes, we know we're on direct tips, and if we have any questions, we must go to the tip committee or contact Atlas. We should not go to the business. And this brings another layer to ensure that you are separating the business from the tip decisions being made. So some question came in right now from Adriana. Do I need a document to prove I have given the cash to the employee committee representative? Would a check or a cash, would a check cashed be a good proof? So again, Adriana, great question. What I'm going to show you is how we do this. You can actually set this up manually if you wanted to manage the money movement via cash. And this is actually the model that was used by our lawyer for his clients like Andrew Peller before we established our technology, which really takes care of all of Andrew Peller tips across Canada. So this is exactly getting to the point, Adriana. So this one's for you. Once the system is set up, you have this infrastructure where the business is on the left, employees are on the right, and Atlas sits in between. So what Atlas does is that Atlas has now become legally the trustee to the business and the trustee to the employees. Keep in mind that the rule from the CRA is you, the business, need to make sure that the tips are not in your control at the end of that shift. So what we do is a step better than this. What we do is we analyze your tip model. We analyze the data from your POS. Together, we assess what is an average amount of tips that are generated between a Monday to a Sunday. Let's say this tip amount, for instance, is $10,000. We actually have a pre-authorized debit agreement similar to your payroll company with you. What we do is we move that initial amount with a buffer. So if it was 10,000, let's say 11,000 from your bank, and we bring that money to stay in our trust account allocated to each location. So your location name, restaurant, let's say Cheers, has now $11,000 in what we call the advance float. Our agreement clearly reads that this advance float has been given by the business to the agent of the employees to be held by that agent and allocated to the employees immediately at the end of their shift. So again, the point here is instead of putting the money in control of the employees at the end of the shift, we're actually doing it proactively. We're grabbing it even before the shift starts. So in that example, on Monday morning at, let's say, 6 a.m., there is $11,000 sitting here. After the lunch shift, we get the data from the POS based on whatever rules you have in your tip division model. Let's say, there's a due back of $1,000 owed. we move that $1,000 into a second safe called the reconciled end of shift. At this point, your balance at as the business is 10,000, and the balance here for the employees is 1,000. If you decide to cancel service with Atlas, we legally owe you $10,000 because the other $1,000 belongs to the employees and will be deposited to their bank accounts. So, Adriana, for yourself, if you're looking to manage this with cash, the recommendation that our lawyer had was that you likely have a business safe that's already on your location. Make sure that that room has a camera. Buy a second safe. The combination of this safe can only be given to your tip committee. Make sure this safe has a deposit slip. And instead of doing this automatically like our system does, what you would do is at the end of the lunch shift, you grab the read from the POS, you go downstairs to your safe room, and you take a look and say, hey, I owe $1,000 to the employees. You open up your safe, grab $1,000 and deposit it here, and the camera is recording. That is the level of proof that will ensure that, hey, if this is ever audited, you could roll the camera up to that date and say, look, here's my manager or myself moving money from here to here, and that's the record that we have for it. Now, instead of doing that manually, which really means you still got to go to the bank and fill the safe up with that money, count the money, make sure 20s are not getting stuck together. You may not have exact change. When we do this digitally, and we balance it out to the penny based on all the data inside of your POS, approved by your tip committee and the ownership. So quickly pausing here for a couple more questions. Is there a difference in the eyes of the CRA if tips are in a tip pool or direct to servers or broken out in the kitchen bartender? No, the CRA doesn't really care about that. The CRA just cares that the business is not in control of the tips. So what you could also do is say, look, I have a trusted employee in the kitchen. I have a trusted employee as a server. At the end of the shift, I'm just going to give the total amounts owed to the kitchen and the total amounts owed to the server to those individuals. Leave it to them to go and properly divide this up amongst the rest of the employees. So if you wanted to do it in that way, you of course can do it there too. The next question is from Ryan. Does providing the tip committee with the own debit card for cash withdrawals constitute the tips being in possession of the employees, essentially? We allow the trusted employee access at any time that they choose to divide once per week. Okay, great question, Ryan. But the issue here and the litmus test or the test that the CRA does is who owns that bank account? If I'm that trusted employee, could you, the owner, contact the bank and say, eliminate that bank card or cancel that person's access? Because if that is, then that doesn't count because you're still controlling it. You're just giving access. What you would do if you want to do it properly is that employee needs to have their own bank account and you need to transfer the money into that bank account, which means that it is not in your control anymore. It's in their control. Then they can divide it and distribute it. But of course, this now means that employee needs to come up with a new bank account, monitor that bank account, make sure they don't do any personal transactions in that bank account, because then it's going to be hard for you to reconcile. Or if a couple of servers come to you and ask you, hey, I didn't get my totals, that employee needs to prove that they had transferred the money. So again, depending on the employees you have and if you have individuals that you can trust at that level, fantastic. If not, then I would really look into that. One more. What should you do? What solutions do you have for a blend of control tips and auto grant and direct tips, volunteer tipping? What information will you provide us to include in our payroll program for contributed tips and related to CPP and EI? Great question. Again, what we do on that side is we separate the totals as long as your POS allows us, and we direct the tips that were left voluntarily into our system for purposes of distribution through Atlas, and the tips that were collected through auto gratuity will be reported separately. If you want Atlas to do the division, we can still do the division. Then we provide you with a CSV that you import inside of your payroll system. And as soon as you import that, the payroll system will have two lines: general earnings under hourly or salary, as well as added, you could call it bonus or commissions, that would be put inside of that. And once they're added, the collective amounts will have its correct deductions for federal, provincial, CPP, EI, and other taxes. The next question is, Hugh, our POS doesn't support payment integration. Therefore, if someone typos the amount received into the POS, the difference will increase or decrease the tip error. However, we cannot verify the entries that are correct until the next day. Can we provide you with the tip information the next day? Great question. So again, Hugh, what we do, this is exactly the reason why we had to come up with a solution that works for people who have modern POSs that integrate and give us the data live, as well as old school POSs that require a little bit of, manual love for you to be able to get the correct data out of them. So because keep in mind, the contract reads that you, the business, have advanced the total amount of tips for the week before they're even generated to the trustee of the employees. It doesn't matter that we don't know the correct amount. So we can always reconcile for you afterwards, or we can wait to get that information from you later. Again, the importance here is that you, the business, have advanced the money before it's even earned to the trustee of the employees. We can get into the details of that later on, Hugh. Happy to do a one-on-one consult. Okay, so that's how the money moves. So what this really means is on Monday, we just moved $1,000. Tuesday, more money. Wednesday, more money. As this gets depleted, our system automatically withdraws money from your bank to always ensure that this save has more money than the amount of tips that are going to be generated in the upcoming shift. At any given point, the ownership can easily log in and be able to view what their total balance is. And if it's a finance team, they can easily see all the list of transactions so they can make sure to balance their books and inform us if there is any discrepancies that we need to create a reconciliation for. So these are all part of the service that we provide. So as an example, here is the owner login. If I log in here and go to settings under float, I can see exactly what the total float is. And even though you'll have a dedicated account manager who you can call to make adjustments, we also have a button here that in case the finance team says, Atlas, I want you to stop all withdrawals, you simply press on pause and we stop all upcoming withdrawals. What this means is that your account manager will contact you the next day to resolve the issue so we can resume to always ensure there is more tips than there's more advanced float than the amount of tips being generated. In addition to that, here's the transaction report that shows exactly when Atlas moves money from your account and who we paid, when we paid, and how much we paid. All of this is exportable, so you can easily export the CSV and balance your books. Okay, so I'm going to get through a couple of last slides here, talk about the cost and overall, and then we'll answer any other remaining questions there. So on the savings first, there are essentially two categories. We have cost savings and cost avoidance. On the cost savings front, we really say that, look, whether you're managing the spreadsheet, making bank trips, counting money, you're spending time, whether it's your full-time employee or part-time employee or partially divided between two, even at $25 an hour, which is roughly about a $50,000 salary, if you think about it, and 5 hours a week, 4.3 weeks in a given month, you're already spending over $530 a month doing things manually, which also means not compliant, error prone, and not transparent for your team. So that's a $6,400 per location annually you're already spending. On the other side of the liability, as I showed you, incorrect tip management that categorizes you as controlled tips could cost you over $30,000 per million. Now, I don't want to scare anyone because CRA is not going around walking down the street, knocking down on doors and saying, show me your tip model. 90% of the audits happen as a result of an employee having a question for Ministry of Labor or the CRA. And when they start to pull on the string and ask the employee questions, the employee will then direct them to you. You have to provide the proof that I mentioned. If the proof is not there, that's when you get dinged with the audit. One last thing. At the beginning of this conversation, Ian mentioned an initiative that started off to really address concerns around WorkSafe. That itself is a concern because if there was $100 of tips generated and you, the employers, have to contribute WorkSafe on that amount, you're contributing 0.9%, so less than 1% towards the WorkSafe. So that means that 90 cents in that example. The other expense that you're currently taking on is that when a customer leaves a $100 tip on a Visa, you receive, let's say, $98. In the province of BC, the ministry says, we call that cost of business. So you have to pay the original $100 to the employees. So for anyone right now who's currently taking off credit card fees or debit fees from credit card or debit tips, please note that the Ministry of Labor in British Columbia does not allow this. There is 3 provinces that this is prohibited: British Columbia, New Brunswick, and Quebec. All other provinces do not have legislation except Ontario. Ontario has legislation that is pro-business, and they say you could take off a minimum of 1.5% or the exact amount of credit card fees. Now, the reason why we left this here, and I just want to clarify that it's not possible in BC right now, but we, Atlas, is actively working with BCRFA and Restaurants Canada to challenge the Ministry of Labor in the province to change their position on this. Because if a customer leaves a $100 tip in cash, you, the business, owe $100 to the employees. If the customer chooses to leave that tip on an Amex and you only receive $96, you should owe only $96 to the employees. Now that you understand the benefits with regards to finances on cost saving and cost avoidance, let's talk about the costs. On the cost front, we have an initial setup fee that we charge. That is $750 per location. This helps us review your tip model, make sure you meet the requirements, translate your spreadsheet into our system so all automations are done automatically, connect to your POS system, or build a process to retrieve the data from the POS for those older POS systems, retrieve the data for scheduling so we know how we're doing the division, train your team, set up your tip committee, and get you up and running. If today, let's say you're with Toast and tomorrow you want to switch to Lightspeed, we do not charge you this fee again. It's only a one-time setup fee. After that fee, you pay either $99 a month or $199 a month. That is the cost of the platform. That includes all the ongoing calculations, daily or per shift report being generated and sent to your employees, all the legal documents being stored in the platform, as well as the service we provide to you and your team members, the committee members, and the employees. They contact any of their questions to Atlas support, and we answer you within 24 hours or less. That's what that cost is. And then there's a cost for depositing the money. If you're doing your own cash management, we can just do the division for you. But if you want us to manage the money movement, the fee for that is a monthly fee of $2.50 per employee when we pay bi-weekly, $4.50 per month per employee when we pay weekly, or neither one of these. And if you want to have more frequent payments, we charge you 75 cents per payment for each payment that's processed. This is only charged for active employees. So if you have 30 employees and only 20 work this month, we only charge you for the 20. And you could also set it up that your back of house gets paid bi-weekly, your front of house gets paid weekly. If some servers want to get paid daily, they can also be paid that. Again, the frequency is possible because you've already advanced the total amount to the trustee of the business, of the employees, actually. Okay, so now the offers that we had promised for BCRFA members. First of all, we have 2 offers here. We had said originally that 10% discount for BCRFA members and referrals. We're actually increasing that to 30% on the initial setup fee if processed before August 31st. And then a 15% discount on the monthly subscription fee, also if signed before August 31st. You also get to lock in these prices. So if our future price increases happen, they won't apply to you, which is another benefit for you to lock in the prices. And another note is that we don't have any long-term contracts unless you want it. When you sign up with us, if the system isn't working or if it's not what you expected or if we don't meet your needs, you can cancel with a 30-day notice. Any questions on costs or implementation before I get into answering the rest of the questions there? Okay. So there's a couple of questions here that I want to answer. One is from Jeff. Can a member of the finance team be part of the tip committee and be trusted employee that is designated to distribute the funds at a later time? Short answer is no, because again, what you want in the tip committee is tipped employees, and the finance team member works for the employer and is paid by the employer, thereby it's seen as controlled by the employer. Having said that, Jeff, our lawyer is able to create a side letter that he'll do for you on the, and we've done this for many operators. And this side letter is the piece that connects those needs, meaning that you may have a tip committee that has decided on the tip division model, but they don't work every shift and they're not there to process these things. And you want your finance team member to do it. So this side letter is a one-time fee that the lawyer charges you for. It's a few $100s. You actually get a discount as an Atlas referral. And the side letter simply says the employee committee has given permission for this individual in finance to manage this. And that's how we're able to meet that need, because the reality of hospitality is you're not going to have a perfect model everywhere. You have tip committee members who may work, maybe your busy shifts, but they're not there for the Monday, Tuesday, and you still need to process tips. So that can be addressed with that solution. Next question is anonymous. Do you work with Dayforce or Dayforce PowerPay? Is the integration possible? Short answer is integrations are always possible. As long as the system you work with does have an integration, we invest the time and we cover that cost as our investment into building that net new integration. We do have a few customers on Dayforce, Ceridian Dayforce. But if for some reason or another, the specific PowerPay integration is in there, and I think PowerPay is another company by Dayforce, not the Ceridian one, we would invest time building it. Normally, it takes us 3 to 4 weeks to complete a new integration, but all of that cost and investment is upfront on our end. You're not obligated to it. All you pay for is the initial setup fee, so we can start the engagement and get that work done. And quick point out, we currently integrate with over 75 systems and adding new ones every month. If I need to audit the tip information to give myself comfort, is a detailed breakdown available to my fingertips? Absolutely. And that's actually a great segue for me to log in and show you everything else that you need to see, as well as what your committee admins would see inside of the system. So give me one quick second. I'm just going to load that up. So as an example, we're going to show this Avalon account, our demo account. So over here, as an owner, for instance, when you logged in, you go to the report section and you're able to see all the tips organized in what we call tip period, very similar to pay period for your payroll company. As an example, I'll show you that, look, between the 7th of July to the 13th, there was a total of $6,335.73. You want to see it per day, you could open it up. You want to see it per shift, you could open it up. You could view it here, you could get it as a PDF or download it as a CSV. If you viewed it here, what you would see is who processed the tips at what time and what were the totals, who worked, what was their role, what is their point or hours or whatever their tip division model is, and how much did they earn for this tip, for this shift. And if you have a model where servers can take cash home for the, and offset their tips, we would also show how much cash was taken home so that you know what your due back is. So that answered that question. Is the advanced float held in trust covered under CDIC? Short answer is yes, because again, the bank partner that we have is Bank of Montreal. So any money put in there is under one framework of a trust account, really secured by Bank of Montreal. We don't use that account for anything on the operational side. There was a bad news, unfortunately, from another competitor of ours, XTM or Anyday, where in their own financial report, they reported that from the money they were holding in reserve for their clients, they actually dipped into that money to the tune of 15 million bucks. And they even have it on their own financial statement. And that's a big no-no for us. We have completely separate accounts to provide that security. Those dollars that you pass on do not go into our operating account. To clarify, in your experience, if we only use auto gratuity 3% of the time, would CRA view that control tip model? Short answer is yes. It's not the percent. Even if it happens one time, if that auditor wants to force your model to be controlled, they will do so. Like I said, Patrick, you are responsible to prove that your tip model is not controlled. Otherwise, the CRA sees all tip models as controlled. Okay, another question. What is the difference between manual entry and integration? Great question. Just to quickly show you, when we set things up in an integrated model, what would have happened is we would have already connected to your scheduling tool, or let me actually log in as a committee admin, to your scheduling tool, or perhaps to your payroll tool. You could also upload it manually if you wanted to. And what we would get is a list of all of your employees. What we technically just need, excuse me, I logged the wrong account. Just do that again. Is their first name, last name, and their role. And I could show you exactly why. So here, to answer the question for the anonymous attendee, first thing that we do is we connect with the scheduling, payroll, or you can manually upload a CSV. So we can grab first name, last name, email address, and their roles. And the reason why we need the role is because most operators have someone, for instance, like Andrew here. He's both a server and a bartender, and they have different tip division rules for those guys. And then the next thing that we do is we integrate to your systems. After that, we set up the unique shifts that you have so that, we have operators who divide tips per shift. We have ones that say, no, I have lunch and dinner, but I want to combine those. And we have others that say, our committee's decided that all the tips from Monday to Sunday get divided up based on all the hours across that. So that's why we create the shifts. Then finally, we set up your tip division model. This is the most sophisticated tip calculator tool in the market. This is the reason why Silverware, Square, Lightspeed, Toast have selected our tip model to offer to their customers. And here I can just quickly show you the flexibility. Inside the system, we've imported every single department. As an example here, bartenders, executive chef, servers, hosts, kitchen staff, bussers. Underneath each one, we get to set up one or multiple sources of tips. As an example, these bartenders get to keep their own tips after their tip out. And these tips are generated from all department sales and all sales categories. I could have said, in addition, these bartenders earn 2% of sales from, for instance, bartender category from drink sales as an example. And then as you set these rules up, we're creating little buckets for each department. And then you get a chance to say, how does that department divide up their tips? They could divide it by hours and points, points alone, even split or manual. If I say hours and points, this really means, we have cooks, sous chefs, dishwashers, and senior cooks inside the kitchen. The tip committee said, the sous chefs should get 1.5 times their hours, the dishwashers 0.5. I can even get more specific and say maybe Brenda is a more senior sous chef, so she gets 1.75, and John is a little bit more junior, so he gets 1.5. Once all of this is set up, the last thing our system does is it asks, are the tips for that department divided for that shift, for that day, or for that week or 2-week period? And when do you want to pay them out? So it means we could pay every day, multiple times a week, once a week, or bi-weekly per department set. And once all of this is in place, this is how easy the world can be. You simply load up the page. All of the shifts that need to be processed are there. So as an example, if I go to dinner shift here on Thursday, it just confirms the data for me. It says, did you open up at 4 and close at 2 so that we collect the right information from your POS? We're right now pinging the POS to capture the data that we need. Once the data comes in, you simply approve total net sales, cash amounts, payment by card type perhaps. This is highly customizable for it to be whatever you want your cash out process to be. I confirm these totals. That was my cash out. It took a whole 20 seconds. And in the second step, what I want to do is now I want to go ahead and I want to divide and distribute those tips amongst the rest of the staff members. So if I just go back here, and let's say, for instance, we're going to do here, there is the system now either collects the punch in, punch out from the POS, if that's your setup, or from your scheduling tool, or from your payroll tool, whatever the system is. And as you can see on the left here, we're going to essentially go ahead and process the tips for bartenders, executive chef, food runners, hosts, kitchen and managers, all within 30 seconds. So as an example, my bartender is about to get 52.22. If I want to see why, I open this up, net sales, total tips, tip out, tips owed is total tips minus tip out. Next department, executive chefs. Next department, food runners. Next department, the hosts, they wanted to do even split as an example. So they split the 1446. Next department, kitchen, they want to do it by hours and points. So we're going to grab the 5781 divided by hours and points. Even if you want to make adjustments here, you're like, oh, Jacob messed up. He didn't clock in at 345 and clock out at 359. He meant 145. So I simply make this 1, and then the system automatically calculates everything. And we confirm the totals for all the departments. And you are done. And what you get is a beautiful report for yourself, for your team members, for your finance team that shows exactly, again, on that date, who processed the tips and who earned what. Okay, 2 more questions here. Is it common practice to pay your tip committee team members a premium hourly wage to acknowledge additional work they do on top? This is something that's, to be frank, it's a business decision. Some of our customers do it, some of them don't. We have a best practices that we can share after the call of how you should set up your tip committee. And that's a note that's included in there. If you think that you'd like to add that in there, by all means you can, but I wouldn't say it's a must-have. Question from Adriana, to be considered under direct tip process, do you need to distribute tips every day? No, because again, if you go back here, you realize that what we said is the most important requirement is you, the business, are not in control of the tips at the end of the shift. And what you would have done with the Atlas system is you've already advanced the tips, even though they're not reconciled, you've advanced the tips, always ensuring that the advance is higher than the amount of tips that could be generated. And this money is sitting with the trustee of the employees. So it doesn't matter that you don't pay every day. You could pay bi-weekly. Keep in mind, that is a decision we form with the committee. And the way that we do this is we say, look, committee, the business can have control tips or direct tips. If the business wants to cover direct tips, they want to coordinate things in this way. Do you guys agree? And once they sign off on it, that's how we meet all those check marks. It is a combined decision between the business and the employee committee. What you have just described has an element of control by the employer, is that we are approving the payments. Isn't this offside with the CRA? Okay, so to go back, that process that I just showed you for the anonymous user, that is actually something that we encourage your tip committee members to process. In fact, if I go back and I log in as the owner user, I do not have any of those permissions. This is, again, a fully purpose-built system to ensure we can prove as an owner. I just see what's in progress and my recent reports. Even in my settings, I don't have access to the tip division model. The only time we make these exceptions is if we have that side letter that we mentioned before that can be created for that specific location, giving a certain individual from finance team the ability to process tips as approved and signed by the tip committee. Daniela, just to clarify, can a general manager be part of the committee and process the tip payments? So the short answer is yes, but a little bit more details here. Even in the province of BC, the stance of the Ministry of Labor is that owners, managers, directors can only participate in tipping if they contribute to the service and they do one or many similar tasks as other tip earning employees. This means that if your manager greets the guests, walks them to the table, picks up plates, takes an order when the servers are busy, settles the bill, then they are contributing to service. And as a result, they can be part of the tip pool, and thereby they could be one of the committee admins. You're saying that the tips take from our account by Atlas is always in excess of the actual amounts. How do we get the excess back? Well, that's a great question. So first of all, at any given point, you'll be able to take a look to see exactly how much Atlas is holding. And then you also see what's the tip amounts that are going to be processed for this coming week or based on previous weeks. If for one reason or another, and we do this proactively ourselves. So as an example, in January, our customers get an email saying that, hey, we assess your tip float. Your tip float is higher than historical tip amount for January. We'd like to refund you more of your money back because we don't need to hold that balance. We move that balance for you. So our team has a rhythm that they contact you to return funds when they're in excess of what we need. You can also request that yourself. Once you request that, the money is returned to you within 2 business days. Great. Okay, last set of advice as we wrap things up, and thank you everyone for staying with us a little bit longer. What happens if you get a call from the CRA? And this is something that, again, we really want to ensure that at a minimum, you guys walk away with understanding what is the difference between controlled and direct, and how do you educate your team, and then consider other ways that our system can help you save time. But one of the most important things is how to protect yourself against a potential audit. If an audit takes place, what you really need to make sure is you do not answer any questions on a call. Simply ask for the details to be mailed to you. And once the details are mailed to you, you can get a representative to diligently go through all the requests and make sure you give the right answers. You do not need to give any answers on the phone. There's a lot of scam artists on CRA, that contact and pretend to be the CRA, first of all. Second of all, you're in the middle of 1,000 things. Even if they make it a mandatory question, you do not need to answer it then. You could simply say, can you please send the information? You have the right to get a representative, and you have the right to share your information basically via mail as well. So it's written and not verbal, so that there's no misunderstanding or misinterpretation by that agent. And with that, I'd love to see if we can wrap things up on our side. I don't see any other questions inside the Q&A. I do want to, first of all, again, thank the hardworking team members at BCRFA for making this possible. Really appreciate all the work that you guys are putting in making the industry better for everyone. I also want to thank everyone who took time out of your busy days. Let's be real, there's never a dull moment in hospitality. Thank you for joining us for this hour and a half. We hope that you found the information useful. As we've offered before, we always provide a free consult. So if you have any questions at all, please contact us and we'd be happy to help you get the answers you need. Last question, requiring a tip committee member to approve payments is an issue. That's no problem. Again, anonymous user, why don't you contact us and we can walk you through how you can address that issue. Great. Now, Ian, I know that you were at the airport. I'm not sure if you're already boarding or not, but.
No, I'm still here, and that was fascinating. And we look forward to developing our partnership. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. Thanks everyone again for your time, and looking forward to seeing if we can be of help. Take care.